in this scene, we've got Shaman who is supposed to be holding this box. And what's in the box? What's in the box? He's got this box in his hand, and he's going to put it into Jules' hand, who then brings it up and holds it in front of his face. That's going to be the goal. Right now, none of that is happening. We have the animation in place, but nothing else. So, when you're dealing with a scene like this, there's a lot of different questions you have to ask yourself before you even get started. The biggest one is, what's going to lead the scene? So what I mean by this is, do I want to animate the hand, and the box follows the hand? I put it into the other character's hand, and then the box switches. So it switches from Shaman to Jules, and then Jules is the one leading the box. Or do I want to have the box lead the hand? So the box is moving and I just constrain the hand to the box. It'll create the same effect, just kind of the magic of constraints. So I'm animating the box instead, and I'm switching the hands. So it's Shaman letting go of the box and Jules grabbing on and then following the box. Both will work. And there is no real wrong answer to this. The main thing that is important with this is what's going to make it easier for you to animate. So that's the first question. My normal kind of methodology for this is depending on how large the object is, how heavy it is, and if there are any points that are going to need tracking. So what I mean by this is, if you have let's go actually here. If I have a prop like this is just the pen holder for my stylus. If I have a prop like this and I'm passing it over to another character, you can see how there's no real points that are sticking out of this. It's just a small object within my hand. Even if it was a little bit bigger, it wouldn't matter if I held it like this. The hand is kind of the same mass as this thing. There's the points of the fingers, the points of this, they're all kind of even. What this means is that I can just constrain this to the hand and animate the wrist over here, and I'm not going to have to worry too much about tracking arcs and tracking different points and hoping that things work out just fine. So in this case, I would constrain this object to the hand. If I have something like this, where I've got this long pen, it could be a sword, it could be a pipe, whatever object it is. Oh, music's a little loud. The music lately has been a little off. It's showing the same levels, but it does seem louder than it normally should. Hopefully that's better. Let me know if it's still too loud. So the wrist is going to, if I constrain something like long or a water bottle like this, it is going to cause an issue where if I animate from the wrist here, any little motion I do in the wrist is going to cause this point, because it's so far from the wrist, to move around a lot. You can see if I just do a little motion with my hand here, the hand isn't really moving, but that point moves a lot. And this is what's known as a hotspot in animation, or a white point. It's a spot that our eyes focus on. As humans, we like to look at, if someone's pointing, we look at the tip of the finger and then go out from there. If we do this, our eyes automatically want to look at that point, which means any little motion that happens there is going to just draw our eye and be very, very noticeable. And that's a pain to clean up. So if I'm constraining something like this, I don't want the wrist to be the thing that I'm trying to deal and clean up all the animation over here. Instead, point at the Pikachus. There we go. And then the Nurse Joy right there. Instead, what I would do is I would constrain the wrist to the object. So I'm actually animating the object, and the hand just follows. what that does is it makes it so that I have more control over the polish and the cleanup of the object, the pen, the sword, whatever it is, versus having to deal with the wrist. You get the same result in the end, but it's easier to clean up and you're not having to spend tons of time trying to clean up curves and animating things one frame at a time to get a clean arc. Now the same thing happens when you have a heavy object. So if I had this and it's a really heavy object, maybe it's just like made out of some super dense material, I would animate the object, not the wrist. Because if it's a heavy object, what that means is it's going to be very hard to move. I can't just do this if it's a heavy object. It's just going to weigh in my wrist and pull it down. It's not going to move much. My wrist is going to move around the object more than the object's going to move in the hand. I can't just do that. So to make it easier, I'll animate the object itself in the scene and then just constrain the hand to it and let the hand kind of react to the object. It gives me a little bit more control on the weight of the object, and it avoids those little wrist flicks that can happen when you're animating a wrist or an arm that kill the sense of weight. Because as soon as the wrist does something like that, it's not heavy anymore. So it depends on the object. A lot of times it's also personal preference. So whatever you're most comfortable with. So in this case, we've got this box. Now there's some points to it. We can definitely see it's a big box. But for this first example, let's actually animate the arms passing the box over. So we're going to constrain the object to the hand. The reason for this is we'll do both and see how the workflow changes between one and the other. So we've got the box here. We've got our animation. Right now, nothing is following. We've just got this very basic animation. My animator brain keeps telling me it needs to be polished, put in the overlap, overshoots. I can't do that. This is a constraint demo. So we need to put this all together. We need the actual hand to lead in this case. So to do this, it's really just creating a constraint. Now, if I wanted to do this super basically, I could just take the IK wrist here, then the box, and constrain it. And that would be it. Now, the problem with that is it's going to be a direct constraint. So I take that, take the box, constrain, let's do a parent, and make sure maintain offset is turned on. That makes sure that the relationship between the two stays together and they don't snap in space to each other. So we do that, and we can see we have a constraint. We have the attributes turn green or blue, depending on if you had animation on the object beforehand. And now, let's actually, oh, my constraint on my own cube got destroyed here. There we go. There we go. So now we have that. Now it's only following Shaman's hand right now. We've only set up the one constraint. So, yay, we're getting there. We're halfway there. Well, not quite. I am not a fan of direct constraints like this. This is kind of a little off topic, but it is something that is very important. Whenever you're dealing with constraints, I always recommend to put a buffer between the constraint and the object. So what that means is, right now I have the control for the hand constrained directly with the control of the box. Now what that means is if I need to adjust this box, maybe as he's lifting it, maybe somewhere around here, I want his hand to slip a little bit and the box starts to fall ever so slightly. If I do a direct constraint, you can see the box snaps right back. Even if I move it all the way over here, snaps right back. I have no ability to animate this constrained object, which as an animator sucks because I've just kind of lost my job. My whole point is to animate things, and I can't animate this. So, I do not like direct constraints like that. It is a great way to just lose your ability to move things. So, how can we make this better? Well, we just need to add a buffer, a way of retaining the ability to animate something. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do this. My personal favorite is to use locators. So I'm going to go to create. I'm going to create a locator right here. Locators are just little buffers, little placeholder items. You can use them for all sorts of things. In this case, I want to use it as a control, an extra control for this box. So to set this up, I'll just go to the start of my animation, and I want to set it to, probably for this one, be the pivot point of the box itself. So you can use this as a new pivot point in a sense. So the first thing I want to do is I want to match it to the position of the box. So I'm going to take the box control, select the locator, go to constrain, parent, and turn off maintain offset. You'll see that that snaps the locator into place right there. But the problem right now is that the locator is constrained to the box. That's actually the opposite of what we want. So once I do this, I'm going to delete the constraint. You can just find the constraint in the outliner here. It should be under the locator. Select that, hit delete. It's gone. But the locator is now snapped into position. It's matched the position of the box, which is nice. So from here, I can actually choose whether I want to keep this pivot point, or maybe let's actually move it so it's a little bit more into the hand, just to kind of showcase how powerful this can be. I'm going to put this like right around there into the palm a little bit more. And now I'm going to reverse that constraint. So let's actually rename this locator. This is going to be red box loc for locator. And I'm going to take this. So I have the locator selected, and now I'm going to select the box. So I'm reversing the direction. And let's create a new constraint. But this time, maintain offset, it will be turned on. Add that. So, what does this mean? Well, now the box is constrained to the locator, which means if I animate the locator, I can animate the box. Okay, great. Well, how does that help us? Well, at this point, I just need the locator to follow the hand. And to do this, because the locator is a separate object, it doesn't have any controls, it's not a rig, it's not a complex prop, I can do a lot more with this. In this case, what I can do is I can just take the locator and parent it to the wrist. Not a constraint, a parent. So if I take the locator, then the wrist, and hit the P key, or go to edit parent here, this will place the locator into the hierarchy of the wrist. What this means is that wherever the wrist goes, the locator will move as well. So if I move the wrist here, you can see it follows. Yay. And if I play through my animation, it looks like it's pretty much where it was before. Well, that's easy. Except I still have full control over the locator. I can still animate the locator and move the object wherever I want it to be. So I have much more control over this now than I had before. Now for some reason here, I'm getting a little offset. Let me double check something here. Yeah, for some reason there's still a constraint. I probably didn't delete something quite right, but that's fine. I can just turn it off here for now. Okay, so we get that. Pretty much right what we had before, but now it's just following the hand. All thanks to this locator. So, there we go. Let's see, if you want to animate the box slipping down from the hand, do you animate from the control of the box or the locator? In this case, it would be the locator. So if he was to hold the box and you want it to slip down the arm, or maybe if I'm holding this and I want to do something like this, where I spin the pen, that would be animating the locator. So, we've got that. Okay. So, with this, just double checking that everything's working. Good. We have our setup. Now, with this setup, we've got the box following the hand. It all works great. At this point, we need to create the switch. And this is where a lot of people kind of hit the stumbling block of, how do I now have the box follow the other hand? And really what this is going to be is creating another constraint setup and then swapping between them. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go to the frame where I need the switch to happen. And what I need to do is I need to have the box change from following one object to another. In this case, it's following the locator. And I want it to follow this hand. Well, same thing as before, I don't want it to follow the hand exactly, because once again, I want to be able to animate the box while it's in the hand. So I need to switch it to another locator. So let's do that. I'm going to create another locator, and I'm going to position it right where this hand is here. So once again, let's snap it into place first. Take the box, then the locator. We're going to create a constraint parent, but maintain offset is turned off. This will snap that locator into place right there. And I'm just going to delete that constraint. So this just basically puts the locator into place here. Now let's put this locator into Jules' hand right there. And I'm going to rename this Jules locator. I should have probably named the other one Shaman locator, but that's fine. So Jules locator. And right away, I'm just going to parent it to the wrist right there. So now, if we watch our animation, that locator follows the hand like that. There we go. So going back to the frame where the switch needs to happen, I'm going to take my locator and then constrain the box to it. Now you'll see we already have a constraint in there, right here. That is the constraint to the other locator. But we can actually add multiple constraints to one object at the same time. If I do this, so locator, then control, I'm going to add the constraint here. Oop. And in the box's control, you can see right down here, we actually have the red box locator right there, and then the Jules locator. There's two constraints in there at the same time. Now the problem here is as soon as I start playing my animation, now we've got this weird magic trick happening. Which is actually kind of cool in its own weird way. But the thing that's happening right now is that Maya is trying to calculate both of these locators at the same time. There's no switch. They're just both on all the time. Which is not what we want. We want to switch from the object following Shaman to the object following Jules. And all we need to do that is to animate these two weight controls here. So you'll see it's W1 or W2. That's the weight of the constraint, the power of it, the percentage that it is on. So we want it to follow Shaman first, the red box. I should have named it better. This is where naming conventions come in very handy. So up until frame 12, I want the red box locator to be on. So I'm going to right click and key selected right there. So it's going to be set to 1. The Jules locator, key selected, set that to 0. So it's off, which means The box just follows shaman. There we go. Now on frame 13, we're going to switch that. So it's going to stop following shaman and follow jewels. Now we don't really see a difference here until this point. And now we've got the switch. Done. That's it. That's as easy as it is. And we've got our animation, and they're switching hands. That's it. So it's not that complex of a setup, honestly. There are a few things to watch out for. The first one is that depending on how subtle this motion is, you can run into snapping issues. So what I mean by snapping issues is where when you switch from holding an object to one hand to the next, you'll see a little pop in the object where it's going to like move and then snap. And let's see if I can actually show this here. For example, if I was to take this hand and maybe adjust it a little bit there and then adjust the hand here, like you can see how the object kind of snaps into place. You can run into issues like that very easily if the animation is very subtle. In order to solve that, the best thing to do is to kind of reanimate that area of the constraint. So what I always do is I'll set the key on, or I'll go to the frame where the constraint has to switch, in this case frame 13, put everything into place how I want it to be, set a key on everything, the constraint object, the hands, all of it, and then usually go back 1 or 2 frames on either side and really just refine that motion to be as solid as possible and kind of keep it there as basically make it so that there's going to be no Maya interference here. It's all my animation. This way, if I accidentally adjust a curve or something gets changed, that whole constraint area stays intact. Now, if you have faster motion, so for example here, this is a pretty fast trade-off here. They're just kind of slapping it into each other's hand. It's very easy to clean that up because you have less small spacing. You don't get those little pops and wiggles. Now, there is another thing that needs to be watched out for here, and that is if ever you need to retime your constraint. So maybe I don't want the hand to switch on frame 13. Maybe I want it to be frame 16. I want to animate the hand kind of just going a little slower at the beginning. Okay, well, I'll just take all my controls and then retime it in my timeline there or my graph editor. Yay, done. No. If you notice, and if you remember, we set a key on frame 12 for the switch. Shaman's hand was to hold onto the box until frame 12. We set a key. And then on frame 13, we set another key to switch it to jewels. There's no frame 12 here on the timeline. It's not there. The reason for this is that the constraint that we animated, these attributes right here, are not part of the cube. They are not the cube's attributes. When we're setting a key and everything we see on the timeline here, these are the cube's attributes, everything up here. These are the constraints attributes, which is actually this object here. It's just showing it as a quick little shortcut in the channel box. If I actually select the constraint here, here are our keys. So what this means is that if you're ever going to retime your animation, when you select everything, you also want to go into the outliner and make sure you select the actual constraint itself. Then the keys will show up. If you don't do this, you're going to start retiming things and all of your constraints will get offset and destroyed, and it's horrible. I've had that happen many times when I was a student because I didn't realize that that was a thing. And I remember one shot I spent a whole day just trying to fix all the constraints because they blew up. I retimed everything and it was a mess. So you want to make sure you select these. Now in this scene, super easy. I can see the constraint right there. Yep, click, drag, select here, hold down Control, click in the outliner there, done. But what if it's a really complex scene? So you have one character passing it off to another, and then you have that character pass it off to another, and then another, and another, and another. Maybe they pass it off 10 times. It's just like a game of hot potato or something like that. Suddenly you have to select 10 constraints in your outliner. And they're all in different objects. So you have the constraint for this one, you have the constraint for that one, and then more and more and more. And sometimes they're hidden, and you have to open up the object to see the constraint. So for example, if I do this, okay, where's the constraint? Okay, box. Okay, cube. There's the constraint. That gets really tiring when you are trying to just select all your constraints so that you can retime them and adjust them. It's a pain. So a quick trick for this is to keep in mind that the constraint nodes here, they are underneath the object that was constrained. So for example, the cube constraint here is under the cube. This constraint is under the cube. This constraint is under the control. This is the one that constrained to the locator. All of these are underneath the object that is constrained. They don't have to be. This is just a default location Maya puts the constraints to keep things organized. They can be anywhere. It doesn't matter that they are within the hierarchy of the object that they're related to. So what I mean by this is I can just create an empty group. So I just selected nothing and hit Control G. This creates a null object, basically an empty group. And I'll just call this constraints. Like that. Take all my constraints, middle mouse drag them into the constraints area. There we go. It makes no difference. The animation will still work exactly as it does. Done. Haha, yay. And if ever I need to animate or retime the constraints, I can just select all of that and then select all of those. So just done. All the constraints selected, and I don't have to dig around the hierarchy and try to dig through the rig or anything like that for all of these constraints. And this is huge if you're animating a lot of constraints. I remember I had a shot where I had 9 constraints, all being animated at different times in different areas, and I didn't know about this trick back then, which meant that I had to dig through the entire hierarchy, and like the outliner was just this huge mess of stuff. And I still remember how much time it took just to find everything, and then you'd collapse everything to keep it nice and clean, so you'd make it small, and then, oh shoot, I've got to find the things again. Ugh, open them all up again. It was nightmarish. This makes it so much easier. So you can just select those and done. So that's pretty much it. So to create a switch between two characters where the characters are leading the object, the big thing is that, or the main key here, is that you just need to constrain the object to both hands in this case, and then switch the weight of the constraint. Switch which constraint the box is following, whether it's following the first person or the next person. And Broken Tangent, hello! I keep forgetting to mention this. For anyone who doesn't know, Broken Tangent also does some amazing animation on Twitch. You should definitely check him out and follow him. He's got some really cool stuff on there. He did a really cool Zelda monster shot earlier. That's really fun. Make that a null group one more time. Was it just creating an empty group? Yeah, that's all it is. Select nothing, hit Control G. You get a null object. If you select something, so let's say I select the ground plane here and hit Control G, it creates a group with that object within it. So a null object in Maya is just creating a group that doesn't have anything. Technically, you could also, like, if I just named a group like that, that's it. I'm not sure why they actually have it call it null by default, but it is very handy because I can just hit Control G a few times and actually make sure I deselect. So Control G, deselect, Control G. So now I've got a bunch of null objects that I can use. And some people actually prefer using null objects instead of locators when they're dealing with constraints. So instead of having these locators in place, you can just create a null object, which it's still technically an object. You can see I can move it around. It's just nothing. It's like a bit of empty space that you can move around and use as a positional point. So I could use this and constrain things to that instead of a locator. It'll get me the same results. For me, the reason I like locators is that they are visual. I can select them if I need to make any adjustments. And it's just a nice little reminder that, oh, there's something there. The problem with null objects for me is I'll tend to forget them because there's nothing there. So if I don't see it, I forget it. Now, kind of since we have multiple locators here, I do want to show one extra little trick with locators, which is by default they come in with this green color, which is nice, but let's say we have a lot of different locators here. It can get very confusing to look at all of these locators and know which one is doing which thing. So for example, I've got two locators in the hand here, and if they're both green, it's like, well, which one was Jules' locator, which one was Shaman's locator, especially when they're over top of each other or very close. If ever you want to adjust a locator's color, just select the locator and then open up the attribute editor, and under object display, go to drawing overrides and enable override. And what you want to do here is just switch the color right there. So let's say I want this one to be pink. There we go. Now this one, enable override. Let's put this one as yellow. Actually, I would avoid, well, yellow's okay. I would avoid bright green and white because those are the selection colors. Bright green, and if you select multiple objects, white. So any color other than those are pretty good. Or else you'll keep thinking you have something selected. So maybe this one's going to be maroon. There we go. And if you want to, instead of using the slider, you can switch the color to RGB, and then you can just pick whatever color you want. So maybe this one's going to be, let's say, deep blue. Or purple. There we go, purple. There we go. Now we've got locators of every color that we want, and nice and easy to remember which one's which. Yeah, so that is switching the object, having objects, let me put it this way, it's having the object constrained to the hand and then switching between two hands. Now, how would we do the same thing, but the object is the thing leading? Well, we're gonna have to redo a little bit of our animation here. So to make this simpler, I'm just going to take my object. We're going to go over another little demo. In this case, what you would want to do is you would want to animate your object first and then constrain the hands to the object. Well, instead of having to kind of redo all of my object's animation and kind of try to take time to do this, what I can do is I've got this other cube. Let's take that here, turn that on. So it's this blue cube. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to constrain it to the original cube. So take the original cube, take my blue cube right there. And I'm going to go to constrain, parent, and I'm going to turn off maintain offset. That way they just snap together. So the blue cube is following the red one. Once I do this, I'm going to go to edit, edit keys, bake simulation. So with the blue cube selected, just the blue cube there, I'm going to go to edit, keys, bake simulation. And what this is going to do is, right now the blue cube is following based on a constraint. It is locked in by a constraint and is following along. I want to take that constraint data and turn it back into keyed information. So, with that object selected, I'm going to make sure that I have hierarchy selected with whatever object I have. And really the only options I'm going to need here are probably going to be, let's do a smart bake. So, by default, what it's going to normally try to do is bake every so many frames. So right now it's sample by 1, which means it'll bake out every single frame. It'll put a key on every single frame. I could do it by 2. It'll put a key every 2 frames. that's a little overkill for the type of scene I have here. So instead, I'm going to do a smart bake, which basically Maya is going to try and figure out where and when it needs keys. It's pretty good most of the time. So let's take that and just hit bake. And if you want to double check, I just reset the settings and then just smart bake. That's pretty much it. So let's bake that out. So it goes through the animation. It's taking that constraint data from the blue cube and repositioning it. Now you'll notice that it wasn't quite perfect. That's fine, honestly. I don't want this to be exactly the same, but it's following close enough. Okay. So let's take this red cube and just turn it off. Now we just have blue cube. Aha. Now the hand is still following because I had animated that. So let's actually take both IK hands here. This is not something you have to do. This is just extra stuff in terms of setting up for the next demo. In general, what you would have is the object already animated, and then the hands not doing anything. So it would be something more like this. Object animated, arms just doing their own thing. And let's actually bring those arms down so they don't look so weird. Go on with that camera. His poor little arm. Let's see what's going on with that arm. Let's see. Stretch. Something's resetting here. Let me just double check. Arm. Oh, stretch the arm probably. Yep. There we go. Okay. So, let's say we've got our scene here. And we've animated our object, like so. And I need to make sure I key this. His arm doesn't reset there. So we've got our object animated and we want the hands to follow this time. So the way I'm going to do this is, if I've already animated the object, I'll just place the hands where I need them to be. So this hand is going to come in and we need it to hold the cube. So imagine this is the start of the scene. Okay, move this into place. Have it grab the cube. That's pretty good. Done. Okay, good. So we'll do one character at a time. At this point, we've got the hand in place, but it's not following along. We need to constrain it. Well, it's the same thing as before, where we want to constrain one object to another, but we're just doing the inverse this time. Instead of constraining the cube to the hand, we're constraining the hand to the cube. So, once again, we're going to create a locator. Create locator. This is going to be Shaman's hand locator. So, let's call this Sham hand locator. And instead of constraining this to the cube, we can constrain this to his wrist here. So instead of using it to influence the cube, we're using it to influence the wrist. Remember, we're doing this in the inverse. So select the wrist, select the locator, constrain parent, maintain offset off, and this will snap the locator into place. From there, I'm just going to delete the constraint, and I could just leave it right there if I want to. Or once again, I can move this to adjust the pivot point wherever I want it to be. Maybe around there. Okay. So we've got all our elements in place. We just need to make the constraint now. So to do this, I'll take the locator and I'm just going to regular parent it, just edit parent it to the cube here. So select the locator, then the cube, edit parent. This means that the locator now follows the cube. Like that. And then take the locator and the wrist and constrain it. So this time I want to maintain offset turned on. Let's apply that. So the wrist now is constrained to the locator, which means we get this. Now, the big thing here, it looks pretty much the same as what we had before, but the key difference here is that the cube is being animated. So if I ever need to adjust something, I would move the cube, and that changes the entire animation now. This makes it a lot easier to polish certain things, especially like I was saying at the beginning, if you're animating a sword or something that's long or got lots of points that are easily focused on and you don't want them to wobble, this makes it a whole lot easier. Okay, so we've got this pretty much done. Except at frame 13, this is going to be the switch. So I can actually animate all of this on this character right away. So on frame 13, let's take my IK wrist and set a key. Now, instead of animating this weight attribute, I don't need to do that in this case. I'm not switching constraints. I'm just turning one constraint on and off. So what this means is on frame 13, this is where the switch is going to happen. And when you set a key on a constrained object, in this case the wrist, what ends up happening is you get a blend parent attribute. This is an on-off switch for the constraint. It tells Maya whether the hand in this case should follow the locator or if it should follow the keys on the wrist. So on 1 it's turned on, 0 it's turned off. So let's go back to frame 12, set another key here. So on frame 12, this is going to be on. It's following the cube. Frame 13, turn that off. So what ends up happening is you get that, and then the cube goes away. And then from there, I can actually just animate that hand coming back. So let's take this here and just kind of bring this back there. Voila. So we've got the first half done. Like that. I definitely need to clean up the arcs there a little bit. So let's do the next half. We need to create that switch. I'm going to go to frame 13 here. This is where Jules' hand should grab onto the object. So let's put that into place. Rotate the hand. Put something like that. And I'm going to copy this pose right to the beginning as well. That way his hand just kind of stays there the whole time. Okay, so on frame 13, his hand is what's going to be leading the box now. So, or let me put it this way. His hand is going to follow the box, not lead. That's very clear. I need to make that distinction. So the box is still animated and I want his hand to just follow along with it. So, to do this, I will need to constrain the hand to the box. Once again, I don't want to do a straight constraint. I almost never want to do a straight constraint between objects. So, our locators come in again. Create a locator. This is going to be Jules, not Lules. Jules to box. Locator. Okay. So, first we need to snap it into position. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but it is a very important thing to mention. When you're constraining things, and when you're parenting things, the order is very important. When you are constraining things, you need to select the object that will lead first, then the object that will follow. So, in this case, I want the locator to snap to the wrist. So I'll select the wrist first, the leader first, then the locator. Go to constrain, parent, maintain offset off, hit apply. And you'll see it snaps into place right there. Okay, let's delete that locator. Or sorry, not that locator, the constraint. It's in place, perfect. Now we need to parent the locator to the wrist. When you are parenting things, not constraint parent, just a regular parent, you select the child first, the object that follows, then the object that leads. It's the inverse. So you select child first, then parent. So locator, then wrist. Edit, parent. So with this, if we move that wrist around, yep, it's following properly. Great. Now actually, I did this in the inverse order. Undo that. We don't want to constrain it to the wrist here, or parent it to the wrist. We want to parent it to the box, because the box is leading. I'm getting my animations mixed up. So we want the locator to follow the box, not the wrist. So same thing. The box is the thing that leads. We're doing a parent operation. So you need to select the child first, then the parent. Locator, then box. Hit P, and there we go. That's what I want. I want that locator to follow the box like so. Okay, perfect. Now we need to constrain the wrist to the locator. So with the constraint, you select the object that leads first, then the object that follows. So the object that's leading in this case is the locator. Select that first, then the wrist. Constrain, parent, and I want maintain offset turned on this time. There we go. Now, what this means is, aha, we get this. Perfect. Except we also get this. Not so perfect. It looks like they're just fighting over the box now. So what's happening here? Well, we constrained the hand to the box, so it's following the box, but there is no on-off switch yet. We need to have the hand actually let go at some point. So to do this, I'm going to go to frame 13, set a key. This is when the hand should be turned on, or when the hand should be holding onto the box. And on frame 12, it should not be holding onto the box. Now this is where you can get a little bit of trouble when you're trying to turn constraints on and off. So I set a key on frame 13. Okay, constraint's going to be on. Got it. I'll go back to frame 12. If I do my normal thing of, okay, I need to set a key first, and then I'll switch the constraint. Hit S to set a key. Turn that off. Look what happens. See how the hand is now spinning at the beginning of the shot? And then there's this little snap right here, and then it moves? Basically what ended up happening is, let me undo this. Undo. There we go. So if I go back to frame 12, the hand is still constrained. You can see it's still following along. Which means if I set a key first, even though technically it looks like nothing's happening, I'm setting a key on all the translates and poses based on this one frame. So for example, let's go to an extreme. If I set a key here, right here, so set a key first and then turn off the constraint, you'll see that the hand is still in that position. When I set a key, it keys it on the visual position that the object is in, even if it's constrained. What this means is if I go back on frame 12 here, I don't want it to move. I want it to be in the same position that it was on frame 13. So I just need to make sure that I do the opposite. I go back to frame 12 and I turn the constraint off first. You'll see the hand snap back right there. And then I can set a key. Now the hand, of course, I'm getting a little gimbal lock there, but now I don't get that little pop right there at the beginning. So what's happening right here? Ugh. Well, I'm just getting some gimbal. So I'll just take my pose from frame 12, move it back to frame 1, and set a key, and make sure I know what happened. Let me undo this. I keep falling for this. Okay. Turn that off. I'm just going to double check. Deselect, reselect, set a key. Okay, yeah. There we go. So the problem that happened is a thing that I keep falling for in newer versions of Maya, because this is something that I'm still not used to. I'm used to a version of Maya that doesn't do this. If I select one attribute here and set a key on it, for example, right click, key selected, or I adjust this one attribute, turn that on and off, and then I'll move in my timeline. If you hit S to set a key, it's only going to key on that one selected attribute. So as I was doing this, I wasn't paying attention and I had one thing selected. I set a key, which means it didn't set a key on everything else that also needed a key. In order to do this properly, the easiest thing is just to deselect and reselect, so that way nothing's selected in the channel box. It's all kind of open, and then when you set a key, it'll go on everything. This is just one of those things I keep messing up on things. I need to remember that. But now we get this. There we go. And we've got the switch. So, to recount here, if you have an object that is leading and the hands are following along, to create the switch, all you need to do is turn the constraints on the hand on and off when you need them to. And you get a nice switch right there. If you have the opposite situation, let's turn off that layer and switch our boxes here, where the hands are leading the object and you need the object to switch. What it is setting two constraints on that one object and animating the actual constraint on the object itself. So, and that's actually here. So you animate the constraint and the weight of the constraint, switching on and off. And in both cases, you get a nice switch, and that's it. So that's the basics of animating constraints and passing an object from one character to the other. Now, you'll definitely want a little bit more refinement here. This was quick and just thrown in place, but it is pretty much just that. It's not super complex. The hardest part is just kind of keeping it kind of ordered in your brain and remembering the way you have to select things. Because when you're parenting something, you have to select the child and the parent. If you're constraining, you select the leader and then the follower. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, just another little tip on this. In general, when I'm animating constraints, I try to do it over one frame. I try not to have constraints animated over a long span of time if I can avoid it. The reason for this is it just gives me full control and I'm not going to have to deal with Maya doing weird things. That's pretty much the main part of it. You can animate it over a span of time, but just be careful. So, for example, let's go back to our blue cube here. Okay. So if I want Shaman's hand to ease out of the hold here, so for example, he's holding on here, and then on frame 13 it turns off. If I had that happen over a span of time, this is what I would end up getting. You can see weirdness. I don't like that, because then it means I'm counter animating. At this point, I'm gonna have to bring that wrist back up here, and then, oh wait, no, now it's shifting around. There are moments where this can be helpful for certain effects. Most cases it's just annoying. So try to do it over one frame if you can.